The trip to Jerusalem had been pleasant. It seemed that the whole land was bright with springtime flowers. All along the way were spots memorable in the history of Israel. Mary and Joseph had pointed these places out and recounted to Jesus the wonderful things God had done for his people in ages past. And now, Jesus felt an eager anticipation for what lay ahead. It was his first Passover visit to Jerusalem. He was 12, that age at which, according to Jewish custom, he was to receive special religious instruction and privileges. Jesus knew that the Passover service had begun many years ago before in Egypt. Pharaoh was unwilling to release his slaves, the Hebrew people, and God sent the angel of death to the firstborn of many families. All who sprinkled their doorposts with the blood of a lamb, as God directed, were safe, and the angel of death passed over their houses. But the Egyptian firstborn children were slain, and Pharaoh decided to free God's people. Their ceremony became known as the Passover, and every child knew it was to remind them of the time when the angel of death had passed over their ancestors. Now, as the boy Jesus stood watching, the ceremonies began in the temple. He saw the priests in their white robes, the bleeding lamb on the altar, and he began to realize more clearly what his mission on earth would be. He was deep in thought. He seemed to be studying a great problem. Even after the services were over and his family, along with the other worshippers, began to leave Jerusalem, he still lingered near the temple. In those days, there was a room connected to the temple where the priests and wise men of Israel taught a sacred school. Jesus quietly entered and seated himself at the feet of the learned men. "The coming of the Messiah is near," one of the priests began the instruction for the day. "His coming will free us from the bondage to our Roman overlords, even as Moses delivered our people from Pharaoh." "Yes," said another, rising to his feet, "the Messiah will be a great king, and we will become the greatest nation on earth." It was then that the serious boy, seated before the leaders, spoke. With a gentle yet intelligent manner, Jesus asked the meaning of Isaiah's prophecy that pointed to the suffering and death of the one sent from God. The priest seemed slightly confused. Then, recovering himself, he inquired, "To which passages of Scripture do you refer?" "It is written," Jesus said, "that he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities." Jesus spoke with such humility that the learned men were not angry that he had dared question them. Instead, they turned with interest to speak with him. After the school had been dismissed for the day, several rabbis lingered in the room. Nodding toward Jesus as he departed, one priest said to a fellow rabbi, "What do you think of him?" The rabbi stroked his chin thoughtfully. "His understanding of the Scriptures and the prophecies far exceeds anything I've seen." "He shows great promise, all right," said a third priest as he joined his friends. "He has independent thought, an original mind. If we could get him to enroll in our school, we could make him a great teacher." "Yes," agreed the rabbi, "providing we can mold his mind to our way of thinking." "We must continue to question him," the first priest said as he began to pace the floor. "He is a modest child with an inquisitive mind, but he disturbs me." "Yes," said the rabbi uneasily, "let's test his knowledge of the Scriptures further. He has a strange way of interpreting prophecy." And so, for the next 2 days, Jesus repeated words of Scripture for the learned men of Israel, giving the passages a depth of meaning that they had not imagined. The boy's words moved the hearts of these men as they had never been moved by words from human lips. Meanwhile, Joseph and Mary had left Jerusalem. They had lost sight of Jesus, but supposed he was among the group of travelers. Along the way, they were so absorbed with the pleasure of traveling with friends that it wasn't until evening that they noticed something was amiss. After the caravan stopped, Joseph began to set up the tent for the night. "Boys," Joseph motioned to his sons, "let's get the tent set up. It's already beginning to get dark." "Jesus has to help too," one said. Suddenly, Joseph straightened up. A strange look crossed his face. Where is Jesus?" he asked. Then he called out to Mary, "Have you seen Jesus?" Immediately, Mary felt panic well up inside of her. "No," she said, "I haven't." Seeing Mary's frightened eyes, Joseph laid his mallet by the tent. Don't worry. I'll look around the camp. It's not like Jesus to just disappear. You know how he is. Maybe he's helping someone." But a search of the camp revealed nothing. No one had seen Jesus all day. Fear began to grip the hearts of Mary and Joseph, and they remembered how harm had nearly come to Jesus once before, when Herod had tried to kill him while he was yet a baby. Finally, Joseph turned to his sons. "Boys," he said, "you go on with the caravan. Your mother and I are going back to Jerusalem to look for Jesus." "It's all my fault," Mary sobbed. I have failed. God entrusted me with his son. Holy angels directed me in taking care of Jesus so that his life would be preserved. For an entire day, I've been so busy with my own selfish interests that I've lost track of him." And so the frightened and worried parents journeyed back to the city of Jerusalem to look for Jesus. On the third day, as they searched about the temple, they suddenly stopped in their tracks. That voice! There was no mistake. There's no other voice like it, so serious and earnest, yet so full of melody. Mary's face lit up with joy. It was Jesus. "Joseph, do you hear him?" "In there," Joseph pointed. "He's in that room. It's the school of the rabbis. Listen to what that boy is saying to them." Rushing inside, Mary threw her arms around her son in relief and happiness. Then, holding him at arm's length and scolding him slightly, she said, "My son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been searching all over for you." Jesus looked kindly at his mother. He had been trying to lead the rabbis into new truths about the Messiah, and now he must help his mother understand. "What made you search for me?" he said. "Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" Seeing that Mary and Joseph did not understand what he meant, Jesus pointed upward, and on his face was a light, a brightness at which they wondered. Divinity was flashing through him. God in heaven was claiming his son. For the first time, Jesus showed that he understood his relationship to the God of the universe. On the way home to Nazareth, Jesus spoke to his parents about what sufferings the Messiah must endure. He tried to strengthen his mother for the time when he would not only be lost for 3 days, but would be in the tomb. If Mary could understand what he must do, his suffering would not be so intense. But from the time when Mary and Joseph found Jesus at the temple, his doings were a mystery to them. When his tasks about the house and the carpenter's shop were done, he would go into the fields to meditate in the green valleys and talk to God. In the early morning, he would often go to the mountainside to study and pray. For 18 years after that first trip to Jerusalem, he patiently worked beside Joseph and helped Mary about the house. Yet he always carried with him the knowledge that someday, in order to save mankind, he would become the Passover lamb, that he would die as the lamb had on the altar. He knew that in time he would complete his mission to earth. In time he would finish his Father's business.